Imagine you wake up one morning and you can't move. Your body is burning with fever. Your muscles ache. You can't eat. There's no pharmacy down the road, no doctor you can call, no painkillers in the cupboard. Now imagine that this is just normal, that this has been the human condition for the vast majority of our existence. So what did people actually do? Today we're going to look at how our ancient ancestors handled illness, not the mythologized version, but what the archaeological and anthropological evidence actually tells us. First, let's be clear about the time frame we're talking about. For most of human evolutionary history, hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in small, mobile groups. They were hunter-gatherers. They moved with the seasons, following food. There were no permanent settlements, no specialized healers in the way we think of them today, and certainly no germ theory. Nobody knew what bacteria or viruses were. And yet, humans survived. They survived long enough to reproduce, to build knowledge across generations, and eventually to create the civilizations we know today. That survival wasn't an accident. It involved a surprisingly sophisticated, if non-scientific, set of responses to illness. Researchers studying this draw on several sources: archaeological remains, evidence from skeletal analysis, observations of present-day hunter-gatherer societies, and the deep roots of folk medicine traditions that survived long enough to be recorded. None of these sources give us a perfect picture, but together they tell an interesting story. The most fundamental response to illness, across all human cultures, ancient and modern, is rest. And this matters more than it might sound. In a hunter-gatherer group, everyone contributes. You hunt, you forage, you carry, you help raise children. If you stop contributing, the group absorbs that cost. The fact that sick individuals were typically allowed to rest, that the group covered for them, is significant. It suggests that care for the ill was a social norm, not an exception. Anthropologists studying contemporary forager societies have observed that sick members are generally looked after. They're given food. They're kept warm. They're not abandoned. Some researchers argue this social support system may be one of the most underrated factors in human survival. Social bonds are protective. Isolation tends to make illness worse. And ancient humans, living in tight-knit groups, were rarely isolated. This isn't sentimentality, it's pragmatics. A group that cares for its sick members maintains its workforce and its knowledge base. A group that abandons them loses both. Now here's where things get genuinely fascinating. Long before anyone understood chemistry, ancient humans were using plants medicinally. And some of what they used actually worked. We know this from several lines of evidence. Fossilized plant material has been found in ancient burial sites, though the interpretation of some of these findings is debated among researchers. Analysis of residue on ancient tools and containers has identified plant compounds, and many remedies that were passed down through oral tradition have since been confirmed to have genuine pharmacological properties. Willow bark is one of the most cited examples. It contains salicin, which the body converts into salicylic acid, the basis of aspirin. Archaeological and historical records suggest willow bark was used for pain and fever across many different cultures, separated by time and geography. Certain molds, used in folk medicine traditions across various cultures, turned out to have antibacterial properties. Honey, used in wound care in many ancient traditions, genuinely has antimicrobial effects. How did they know? Probably through a very long process of trial, observation, and transmission of knowledge. Someone noticed that chewing a particular bark seemed to reduce fever. That knowledge was passed on. Over generations, it was refined. This isn't science in the modern sense. There were no controlled trials, no mechanisms understood, but it was empirical based on observed outcomes, and it was cumulative. each generation built on what the previous one had learned. It's also worth noting that not every plant remedy worked. Many ancient remedies were ineffective or even harmful. Ancient humans didn't have a reliable way to distinguish between the two, but the ones that did work tended to survive in the knowledge tradition longer than the ones that didn't. In virtually every ancient culture we have records of, illness wasn't understood purely as a physical event. It was often interpreted through a spiritual or supernatural framework. Sickness might be seen as a sign of spiritual imbalance, an ancestral punishment, or the work of malevolent forces. The healer, shaman, medicine person, witch doctor, was often as much a spiritual intermediary as a practical one. It's tempting, from a modern perspective, to dismiss all of this as superstition, but that would be an oversimplification. We now know that psychological and social factors genuinely influence health outcomes. The placebo effect is real and well documented. Stress affects immune function. Feeling cared for and believed in can influence how a patient responds to treatment. A healer who gave the sick person focused attention, performed a ritual that provided structure and meaning, and reassured both the patient and the group. That healer was doing something real, even without any pharmacological knowledge. This doesn't mean the supernatural explanations were correct. They weren't. But the social and psychological context of healing mattered, and ancient cultures, perhaps without understanding why, had built systems that provided it. We should be honest about the limits. Many illnesses that are straightforward to treat today were death sentences in the ancient world. Infected wounds, appendicitis, complications in childbirth, bacterial infections that spread unchecked. Analysis of ancient skeletal remains shows significant evidence of healed injuries, which tells us the body's own repair systems were often effective, and that people did survive serious trauma. But it also shows evidence of diseases that clearly shortened lives. Life expectancy figures from prehistoric populations are complicated by high rates of childhood mortality. Those who survived childhood in hunter-gatherer societies could often reach reasonably advanced ages, but the risk of death from illness at any stage of life was far higher than it is in wealthy countries today. There's no romanticizing this. Ancient humans faced illness with limited tools, no understanding of its causes, and no way to access the treatments we now take for granted. The remarkable thing isn't that they had all the answers. It's that they responded with what they had: social support, empirical observation, ritual meaning, and built enough resilience as a species to survive. The history of how humans have handled illness is, in a lot of ways, the history of what it means to be human. It's about the impulse to care for one another, the drive to find patterns in experience and pass knowledge forward, the need to make meaning out of suffering. Modern medicine has transformed what's possible, but many of the social and psychological dimensions of healing that ancient humans relied on, community, attention, ritual, rest, remain relevant today. We haven't left them behind so much as we've layered pharmacology and surgery on top of them. The next time you're ill and someone brings you a cup of tea, or sits with you, or tells you you're going to be okay, that instinct is old, much older than any hospital.